Thank you, and welcome to Jane Brockbank, who's our first person on stage to have a kind of in-conversation with, to give, hopefully, you guys a better taste and understanding of the day in the life of a fashion buyer, really. So I've got a series of questions to grill Jane with, so she'll do her best to answer. I'm sure she'll do a great job. So my first question is, well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. So that's fantastic, and I'm sure the audience appreciate that. You're currently a freelance fashion buyer. So I was just thinking first, could you tell me what that means and who it is that you're working for at the moment, and perhaps who you've worked for in the past?
Okay. Basically, by freelance, it means that I'm self-employed. So I am kind of my own business. So I'm offering a service, and I'm offering my skills, knowledge and expertise, basically. I'm currently working for Miss Selfridge 2 to 3 days a week on a specific project for them. And in terms of my background, so I've been in the fashion industry for over 20 years. I started in the early 90s, so probably before some of the audience was even born. So I started in the early 90s at a company called Oasis, and I started as a buyer's admin. I think I was quite lucky really at the time, because I was able to work for a company that was growing. So when I first started at the company, they had 35 stores. By the time I left, 8 years later, they had 175 stores. So I was able to progress my career and grow with them as the company grew as well. So yeah, I started as a buyer's admin. I worked my way up to an assistant buyer. When I was an assistant buyer, I was given responsibility to buy my own area as a junior buyer, and I was given the responsibility of suede and leather. And at the time, suede and leather went out of fashion, but I was lucky to work with a supplier, and we developed a range in PVC which took good sales, so I was quite lucky. I was also able to go to China, to Hong Kong, in my role as an assistant buyer with the knitwear buyer. And then from that I progressed to buyer. I bought the jersey department. And that was over a period of 8 years. Then I decided I wanted a new challenge, so I left to work for Warehouse, where I went to work as a head of buying, which meant that I oversaw 4 buyers and their product teams and product areas. I did that for 5 years, which was a really great experience. I did a lot of travelling. At the time, my boss was very into fashion brands and travelling and seeing lots of different kind of fashion brands and people watching. So I was lucky to do a lot of travelling. Then from that, again, I was constantly looking for new challenges. So I went to work for a company called Kookai, which I worked for a company in the UK that had the license for Kookai, which is a French brand, and we would go over to Paris and select from their ranges for our stores, but also I set up the own buy area where we had an agreement with them that we could design, source and buy a certain amount of the range ourselves, which was quite a new thing for the company. That then led me on to working at New Look, which led me to Dorset. Again, where I worked as a head of buying. After I had a child, I decided I wanted to take a kind of more backseat role, and I downgraded to a senior buyer. And then since then, I have been working in London. I worked for Oasis again for a number of years, and then that's led me on now to working freelance. So
wow, quite a lot of career,
yeah.
quite a lot of experience behind you. So yeah, you're definitely probably going to be captured by some students for advice, I'm sure, after we finished this interview today. So when lots of people think about fashion buying, I get the impression that they think it's a very glamorous role. Everybody that quite a few students that come onto the programme, they automatically ask them at the beginning of their studies, what is it you want to be? I would say a large majority say fashion buyer, but without really having the knowledge of what the role entails. So Is it as glamorous as it sounds? And, you know, travelling the world, spending someone else's money. So give us the real deal, if you like.
Well, it can be glamorous, and there, you know, you do get to travel. There is a lot of travel within the role, and it can be glamorous, and some of it cannot be glamorous. So, you know, you might get to go on inspiration trips where you're, you know, looking for inspiration to develop your range, which means you might get to go to New York or LA or Tokyo, and yeah, fundamentally you are looking at shops out there, you're looking at retail concepts, and you're looking for inspiration for your range. And so yeah, that's quite an amazing part of the role, but fundamentally you're on a tight budget. You know, time is money, so you know, you've got to get off that plane, dump your bags at the hotel and get around the shops, and you might be, you know, because of the time difference, you might be 10 hours ahead, but the shops might be open for another 10 hours, so you've got to keep going, and you've got to get as much as you can out of that trip, and then you've got to, the next day, be up and out at the shops, and you know, you've got a list of stores, and you've got to take photos and buy samples, and then you've got to bring it back, you've got to feed back to everybody, you know, and justify really the money that's being spent, and then you've got to turn those ideas into reality and put that back into the range. And so, you know, there is an element of it that's glamorous, but it's also hard work.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's other travel as well, there's development trips, so you might go to China, for example, which again, you know, can be amazing, but equally, you know, you're there for work, you might spend 3 hours in a minibus to get to the factory, you might be at the factory till 10 o'clock at night, you know, and you're working hard and you're trying to get as much as you can out of the range. But yeah, it's an amazing experience to do the travelling. But the, you know, and the reality is that fundamentally you're all kind of developing, sourcing and buying a specific range of products aimed at a specific customer and target price, really. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, so that sort of links into my next question. You talked about, you know, hard working and obviously needing to be motivated. So what would you say are the real skills and talents that somebody who's thinking about going to Fashion By, what would you say they really needed to have about them as a person?
I think you have to be really passionate about fashion, basically. If you haven't got that enthusiasm and passion for fashion, I think it's quite hard, really, because that's really what motivates you and keeps you going. You've got to be creative. I think you know, at the end of the day, it's fashion. Yes, you will have a designer, but you've got to be creative around product and ideas, and also creative in your thinking. You're going to get a lot of problems that you have to solve along the way, and you have to be quite creative in your thinking. You have to have enthusiasm and drive and energy, really, to, you know, to do the travelling and to do the work as well. You have to be quite flexible and adaptable, because you know you're going to set out your store to buy your range, and then you're going to review your sales, and if your sales are telling you that, you know, your next few months worth of product might not sell, you've got to react to that, and you've got to change your product. So you've got to be very flexible, and you have to be quite organised, because you might be buying you might be working on 3 seasons at a time. Yes. So you might be chasing and finishing your deliveries for this spring, summer, working on next autumn, winter, and starting, you know, initial development ideas for next spring, summer. Yeah. So you've got to be quite good at multitasking. I think people skills are good. You're going to work with lots of people within the organisation. You're going to build relationships with your suppliers, you're going to communicate to your directors, you're going to manage your team. So I think good people skills, good communication skills will help you along the way. I think they're kind of some of the, you know, skills. I think also some of the skills you'll have already if you're passionate about fashion and, you know, you're quite enthusiastic and driven, and some of the skills you're not expected to have, you're going to gain those, you know, some of the experience and skills you're going to gain as you work, you know, as you progress through your career.
Sure, thanks. I'm just thinking, you talked about innovation and creativity a bit there. I'm just interested to know, did you ever take a creative risk in your career, and did it pay off? So were you looking to push the boundaries for the brand that you were working for? Did you do a buy that at one point you thought, oh, or have things always gone smoothly in that way?
I mean, I can't necessarily think of a specific thing, but there are things where you think, yeah, that, you know, and everybody in the room's like, yeah, that's really going to sell, and it goes into store and it bombs, and you're just like, oh, you know, we all, you know, it's not like some of you said, well, you know, that is going to sell, and some of the directors said, no, it won't. You know, you all felt for it, and it went into store and bombed, and, you know, there are things where you think, she's never going to get that, she's never going to buy into that, and it's one of your, you know, one of your biggest sellers, kind of, and that's I think that's the exciting thing of it, really, as well, you know.
Yeah, you mentioned some cardigan, I think it was, that you bought quite a few.
Yeah, no, I think you were asking me in terms of some of my experiences, and you're going to have to basically sell your range to your directors there, because ultimately they're going to sign off your budgets, and you know, some of the volumes that you're going to buy are going to be quite big. And I think, yeah, I was giving you the example where I placed an order of 50,000 units on a jersey cardigan, and one of my directors kind of challenged me and said, 50,000 units, that's a lot, you better hope it's going to sell. And I said, luckily, I felt quite confident on that one. I was like, it'll sell, don't worry, it'll sell. But there are some where you, and it did sell, thank God.
Yeah.
But there are some where you're like, you know, you wake up on it, the night and I'm going, oh my God.
Yeah. So I think this might go back to the point Steph made about resilience.
Yeah.
In that sense. So did you always want to be a buyer? So kind of how did you get into that? What was your journey?
I was always interested in fashion, so yeah, I used to make clothes out of curtains. I used to go to jumble sales and vintage shops. So I was always interested in fashion, but I wanted to pursue a career in art and design, and so I did a degree in fashion and textiles, and specifically in constructed textiles.
Right.
And at the time I thought that I wanted to be more like a fine artist, so I wanted to do kind of tapestry wall hangings and be quite creative and arty. And then somebody came to the college that I was at who was a buyer from the industry, and she talked about the buyer's role and the creativity, but also the business and the commercial side. And that was it. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what that's what I want to be.
Yeah, that's great. Is it a lucrative career, fashion buying?
It can be, yes. I mean, obviously, when you're starting out, you know, as a trainee or as an admin, it's not, you know, necessarily highly paid. But as you start to progress up the career, and once you get to buyer and senior buyer and management level, then yes, you know, you can earn a good salary. And some companies offer bonus schemes. So if your department performs well, there is an incentive of a bonus. And some companies, you get a discount on the clothing in store, and also they have things like sample sales as well. So yeah,
there's perks.
There are perks. But you work hard, so it's nice to get the perks.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think some of the programs that obviously you're developing here, which kind of do fuse that business and creativity, do you think that these days that's important, that there is that kind of marriage of skills before you go in? Because I think probably, you know, we're from, you know, similar studying eras, that there wasn't really so many marketing management programs around. Do you think you're working with people now that are coming through from those programs? Or?
Yeah, no, I think definitely now most of the kind of more junior level and people that are applying into buying have got like a fashion marketing kind of related degree. I think at the time they didn't offer that type of course when I was younger. I think if I had, you know, if I was back then and there was that course on offer, I would definitely have done a fashion marketing degree rather than a pure design degree. I think the marketplace has changed over the time that I've been in buying, and I think it's, you know, it's quite tough out there, and it's a changing environment, you know, with the internet and the speed of fashion, and everybody's into fashion, they're following celebrity fashion, there's blogs. So I think it's much bigger than it ever was. So I think to be able to do a course that's kind of creative but marring the commercial skills, you know, I think that's an absolute bonus, really.
So other than obviously that side of things, what other kind of piece of advice would you give any of these young people in the room wishing to pursue a career in buying?
I mean, similar, I think, to really what kind of Seth said. You know, I think if you can, maybe get a Saturday job in store, because, you know, at the end of the day, yes, there's the internet, but fundamentally when you're sitting in head office as, you know, a buyer and you're choosing your range, it's going to the shop floor, you know, so to get retail experience on the shop floor, to get an understanding of the customer and how stores work is all good experience. And any work experience you can get in a buying office, you know, you can write in and get maybe like a week's work experience, which is unpaid, but, you know, it's a great experience. I think things like, Seth said, like the internet, you know, the fashion shows that are on, you can go onto style.com, you know, looking at other retailers' product offers, just keeping up to date with trends, just immersing yourself really in fashion. And I think you've got to be prepared to work hard, because even though you've got you know, you might have a degree, but you're still going to have to go in at that trainee buyer stroke admin level and work your way up to gain that experience, really.
So do you think it's about demonstrating that passion and determination?
Yeah, definitely.
At those first contact points of interview for those positions?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you very much, Jane.